I taught Tom Brady yoga for 2 or 3 years when he just started out. Like when I was in Boston, he was in Boston, like 2003, 2004. He was coming to class. I didn't know it was Tom Brady. Like he was coming to class. 'Cause he's
so
like
zen. You're so
a
zen. You don't
young
know it's Tom
dude
Brady. And this is in
this young
Boston
dude.
too.
Right. He came into the studio and no one recognized him. Because we had to walk downstairs, sign up, come upstairs into this room, and he'd come to the 4 o'clocks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And there was this guy, and I went by one time and gave him a thumbs up. I was just like, "Hey, nice job," because he was in this thing called Arch and Grasna, and I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty good." He's not doing this that bad. This guy seems like he's got a little bit of game. I gave him a thumbs up, and he looked at me like, literally, what the. Like, are you, basically, are you trying to insult me right now? And I was like, no, I'm not. The thumbs up thing that's usually, it's a good thing, but I won't do it again. Like, he gave me a look like, you've got to be kidding me. And I was like, I wasn't, but I won't again.
Larry and I are loving this book. Absolutely loving this book. So we certainly want to talk to you a bit about, how you came around to writing this book. We have lots of amazing impressions just on the way you wrote it, how you structured it, the voice, your ability to access and explain so many things in a very straightforward way. But I think before we get to that, we'd really like to hear kind of how you fell into yoga. And I think, the mission of this podcast is really to help kind of, reduce the chasm from guys who are, who haven't thought about yoga, who haven't considered it, or just had some aversion to it, to kind of close the gap and get them to really consider yoga, start a practice, get into it, see where it takes them. Maybe it's just for their bad backs and they're just, their existential situation, but maybe it blossoms into other things. So that's the mission of this podcast. And, we know we briefly interacted with you at Kripalu at Johnny's retreat. We know Johnny just, loves you as well. And so we thought you would be great to have on this conversation, and really want to highlight your story and your path, and kind of what were the doors that you went through that helped you grow into this amazing, flourishing life that you now live.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, as you were talking, I was like, well, I don't usually start the story here, but I think this is where it starts. I'm an athlete. I will own that. But the reason that I focused so intensely as an athlete in my childhood was that the only people of color who were succeeding in my world were on TV playing football. And so I immediately was like, oh, I guess I'm that, that's who I am. I don't think I enjoyed school to begin with, but I didn't take classroom work very seriously, but I took time on a playing field extremely seriously. But I was doing it almost entirely for, I don't want to say egoic reasons, but the formation of the self. Like this is where I shine. This is where I get, approval. This is my path, and at around middle school, I was in a school where, this is the late 70s now, and people started to lift weights in the summer to get ready for preseason football. Because we didn't really have, there was no like functional strength or anything. So that people didn't understand. So we literally just like bench pressed and stuff to get ready for football, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Like mobility training would be a little more, there's other things you could be doing, but we didn't know. And so in the summer of 79, I joined a Nautilus. Nautilus was this like state of the art thing, and people were talking well of it. And I would, I'd run there, I'd lift, and I'd run home. And I found that I had a lot of success. My body responds well to exercise, I've been told. But what I really found was the first time in my life I learned how to self-regulate. Before that, I just watched television. Like I had an enormous amount of conflict and drama in my life. And I just would watch TV and it would settle me. And this was the first thing I ever did that like was my own. I could schedule it. I'm like, I'm going to do this. I could do it the way I wanted to do it. And when I was done, I felt better. And it was far superior. I was at this, by the time I was like 14, I was drinking and drugging and TBing. And those did not feel as good as exercise. And so, although sports continued, I think of sports and exercise as kind of two different learnings. I learned how to lean into a couple hours in the gym to feel better. Um, and that would be something that would come back later on. I got sober at 26 in the military. Um, and in rehab, I started running because there was so much emotional turmoil going on. It was a 6-week rehab in 1990 in Stuttgart, Germany, and really good people. I'm around good people. Everything's cool, but I was more or less freaking out. It's like I was all about the sobriety. I was all about the new life, but processing the fact that I was an addict and that I had, we were doing an hour and a half of group therapy every day, and
Yeah.
I and my peers were like freaked out trauma survivors. It was a lot to be taking on at 26.
Right.
And so me
It
and
freaked you out more so in the idea of how your identity was shifting, or more of just being away from the comfort of having a drink, or both?
I think it's more like, yeah, I think what drinking and TVing and exercising was doing was avoiding feelings. And I had removed a lot of barriers to feeling. Most of what I was feeling at that time was being a young person who was completely overwhelmed by life and had no plan. And, you know, I feel like the experience of being that kid was like this show goes on, whether you like it or not, and just being caught in this river of life without really a paddle and looking around and comparing myself to others and stuff. And so I got to rehab and I didn't know how to process. Like um, I got on a plane and left my home for 3 years. Like I was stationed in Germany at 24 years old. I got on a plane and left. And there was like no processing, it was just like, okay, mom, dad, I'll see you when I get back. Okay, I'm out. It's like I'm a parent now. My son's 18. We spent weeks emotionally as a family he went to college as a freshman. He's like 4 hours away. Right? We spent weeks in mental, emotional like processing of him leaving. We took him there. There was tears. We're in touch. I was like, okay, I'm out. I like get on a plane and I'm gone for 3 years. It's like there was no processing of anything, no talking about anything. And all of a sudden I'm feeling all my feelings, and I had no names for them. All those things they have now with the kids is like you could name the feelings and stuff. I just was like sweating a lot. I didn't know what I was feeling or why. And I found that going out for a run in the morning, I became kind of I didn't know the word regulation, but I was able to then kind of meet and hold the morning with a little more sobriety, a little more calm,
Yep.
a little more clarity. And so, you know, exercise and sobriety were closely linked. Um, uh, I also learned in 12-step programs how to have a practice, right? So my practice was going to meetings every day, and then having a sponsor and talking to my sponsor. But then there was like prayer and meditation in the morning, and you started to like build your day around your practice. And so I'd been doing that for like there was a practice of sobriety that I was learning in a 12-step meeting. That's a 24/7 deal,
Mm-hmm.
and how you're being and everything. And even like, why get a job, Well, you're learning about structure, you're being self-supporting. There was like a intention behind you weren't just having a job to kind of keep a roof over your head. Your job was a place of learning and a place of experimentation, a place to like practice being human, practice being a sober human. And I was taught to think of my job that way.
Mm.
And my friendships are a place to kind of show up in a very specific way, right? Family is a place to show up. And so I was learning to think of my whole day as a place of learning, and the phrase was progress, not perfection. You weren't trying to, there wasn't an ideal you're trying to measure up with. There was a direction you were pointing in, you know, and there was the intention of staying pointing in that direction one day at a time, and using friendships and mentoring and community to support you in pointing in the right direction, you know. And the idea of sobriety was, it wasn't like you were white knuckling sobriety. There was like a sense of freedom and joy in the life that you were practicing. And so all of that was in place. And I ended up going to yoga at like 5 years sober. And now why I went to yoga was that I had become open-minded. And I had become open-minded because I had tried this and it worked. I had tried that and it worked. It's like there were suggestions that were being made along the way. Like the 11th step in a 12-step program says sought through prayer and meditation. And I had already been praying, and it suggested that I try meditation. So in 1991, at 1 year sober, I tried meditation, and it improved my life. And like being a sober person, as I understood it, was like you're not gonna, you don't have contempt prior to investigation. Like someone says, "Hey, I'm a vegan," or someone says, "Hey, I do meditation," or someone says, "Hey, I square dance," and the idea is like I don't know about these things, and to learn about them, I should try them and see what they're like. It's not like I have an opinion about something I know nothing about.
And were you naturally wired that way, or was that something that really the 12-step help set you on?
I think the 12 step was critical. The military had taught me how to learn.
Hmm.
I didn't know how to learn. I didn't know how to participate. Um, being sports is, there's a lot there, but like there wasn't enough accountability. It wasn't until I went into the military where you're accountable.
Right, like you can't miss a tackle when you're out there in the field, right?
They're like, no, we're going to want you to do it the way we said we want you to do it. Like right now. No, this isn't a negotiation. There was a guy, I went to Ranger School, and there was this guy, Sergeant Keith, in 3 a.m. in the morning in the middle of the mountains. He'd be like, Burger King, Burger King. And we'd all be like, oh, he wants to do it his way. If you heard Burger King, like fire and brimstone was about to happen. It was like you did not want to hear Burger King. And so I learned in a very hard school how to listen, and apply. They went through your rucksacks, and if you put something where it wasn't supposed to be, and there's a lot of somethings. This is like an 81-day training, so you have a lot of stuff in that. There's a lot of stuff, and they want it to be in there a certain way. And if you didn't have it the way, if you were making stuff up, it didn't go well.
Do you think the military helped set you up for the idea of non-attachment and learning how to let go of what you might want or want to do?
Oh, absolutely. It's like I came into AA being like, I'm good, meaning I can come into a situation, listen, and apply. I don't need to have I can just show up and learn and not know where this is going. I don't have, so what will I be learning on this thing, and where will I don't need to be in control. It's like they did me such a solid. They invested in me. I did ROTC. They put me through college. They sent me, after college, you do a full year of intensive training before you go to your unit. Like they invested in me and they sent me to rehab, And so it was a very, without their investment in me, I would not have been able to have the life that I have. No question. And the net of it was that they created a culture where learning and teaching were both equally admirable. It was admirable to go into a situation and learn, and it's admirable to be a teacher and share, what you have learned with others. Like our instructors were people who were considered to be, of the utmost. We had the utmost respect for our instructors, which is just not the case when I was in school. Like, the authority figures were like, did not have my utmost respect, but in the military, I genuinely respected my instructors. I respected my commanding officer, and I learned what that felt like to admire not someone on TV, but someone in front of you, and to want to be someone who could do that, who could inspire others. And so, very formative, like in my bones, those people live in my bones. And so when I went into 12-step programs, I had the habit of respect. I had the habit of paying attention. I had the habit of process. It's like, yeah, you start here, you don't know what's going on. And then after some time and effort, you learn something else. It's like, it's like that. Like, like yoga students show up sometimes and they're like pissed if they're not great immediately. It's like, I'm not great at this immediately,
Yeah.
And I had learned, it took me 3 years to really learn how to land navigate, like to be able to use a map and compass properly. And you'd think, 3 years. I can remember exactly the moment when I started to be able to really, it's called train associate, where you don't even need a compass anymore. You can look at a map and really see what it's telling you, and then look around and see what you're seeing, And I was in Germany. I started training in this. It's probably more than 3 years, but 3 years of intensive training on land navigation to get to the point where I could actually do it. And that happened before I got sober. And so there was,
there seem to be so many parallels and sort of metaphors from some of the discipline and insights and the kind of removing of the self in the military compared to with yoga. Learning how to let go of the self. Fall in line, so to speak, in some ways. The lineage of teachers and realizing that you probably know less than you think you know. I just want to hit a little bit more about how did yoga get on your radar? Like, how did it even show up in your universe?
Well, meditation was, so after I got out of the military, I ended up living in Harvard Square. And Jack Kornfield had come back from his studies in Thailand. Jack Kornfield was a monk in Thailand for like 3 or 4 years. And he came back to a PhD program in Harvard. So Harvard Square is like ground zero of the mindfulness movement of his generation. I'm sure there were mindfulness teachers before Jack Kornfield, but John Kabat-Zinn. Are you guys familiar with John Kabat-Zinn?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, he was at MIT. It's not a coincidence that that Jack Kornfield is at Harvard, John Kabat-Zinn is in MIT. John Kabat-Zinn becomes a student of Jack Kornfield, and so when I came back in 1991, that whole world. Like Jack Kornfield opened Insight Meditation Center in I usually know the name, Central Massachusetts, in 1978. So it's still pretty like new. It has a really strong presence. And so the meetings I went to, everyone having a meditation practice was something that more than half of the people there cultivated. And what a meditation practice was kind of fleshed out. It was a mindfulness practice, and there was like mindfulness courses and a center. Like there's a place on Broadway that was like less than 2 miles from my house. And so I started meditating with, I got back in 91, and the Christmas of 91, I bought my first meditation book. And so, I felt the physical effects of meditation in terms of calming myself down and sort of settling my mind. And then when I heard about that there was like this yoga thing, which is like you get to do like athletics, but it's meditation, I was like, That sounds great. The
Yeah,
idea of
right.
like using your body, including the body. Now, I would just sit in a chair, and count breaths. I was like, that sounds great. I can remember just being like, well, that sounds like a good idea. Um, Long story short, my about to be wife gets sent by her family to Kripalu for the weekend, and I don't know what this is. I don't know what Kripalu is. But she comes back and she brings this leaf. It's the fall. It's about this big. It's the size of a dinner plate. It's like gold and orange and everything. And I didn't know at the time, but the moment I got sober, I got sensitive to energy. That's just something, yeah. And I was drawn to energy. That's why I live in California. Is like when I come here, it's like the energy here is very. I I'm like it's a lock. I'm going to live where that energy is. Um, And so I look at the leaf. Now I'm like a decade before I'd acknowledged that I knew anything about energy. But like I look at this leaf and I was like, the frequency of the space that leaf came from, you got to
It
be
caught you.
there,
It caught
like
you.
like that because I was already aware that like stress is a frequency,
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
safety is a frequency, love is a frequency, spiritual experience is a frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And that frequency was loud. There's a way that the earth is holding us with such, if we can feel the frequency of nature, there's no going back. It's such a powerful frequency. Like how
It's
the,
like
that's, go ahead.
it's like a tuning fork. It's kind of like you get in that vibration and that rhythm, whether you're on a trail or you're a hike or you're skiing or just going for a walk and staying connected. Like it's literally like a tuning fork.
Yeah, like sanity is a frequency, gratitude is a frequency. And so that leaf was eloquent of a frequency that was arresting, like literally was arresting. And I was like, I need to go wherever that leaf came from. And so um, my next vacation, I was working in treatment with kids, and I wasn't making much money, so it took a while. But about maybe 6 months later, I was at Kripalu for my first time. I took my first class, and I never looked back. It's like the same way that going to the gym when I was a kid made me feel better. Like yoga was like way more effective. Like after a gym workout, like I'd get to the car and I couldn't drive because there was so much lactic acid in my arms. I put my hands on the steering wheel and be like, not yet. And I have to wait until my body processed the lactic acid so I could drive the car. After yoga, I just felt expansive. I felt more free in my body. And so I was immediately like, okay, this is going to be a part of my sobriety permanently. I'm going to just do these poses all the time, every morning. And that's been true. It's been basically 30 years of doing poses in the morning.
Was it, just to go back to what you said about, when you got sober, you were able to feel energy again. Do you remember when you started to come alive and have that feeling? Was it overwhelming? Or is it a sense of being numb prior? And then as you got sober, if you started feeling all these things at once, was it overwhelming? How did you start to make sense of some of that?
Well, as a kid, I was feeling it. I mean, I went to, where are you guys from?
New England, Connecticut.
Okay. Well, I went to elementary school in a place called Dover, which is like horse country. It's very rural. And
Yeah.
the snow and the trees and the smells, all that stuff was like evocative to me. Very important to me. I'm talking to you now from the Santa Cruz Mountains and the redwoods. It's like it was very important to me to be in nature. And then when I started using, I lost, adolescence, you get kind of crazy, and I lost touch with it all. And then coming back um, from the military and to New England, it was like that full circle thing where my first couple of years of sobriety, I could really feel what it was like to be younger again. And so to answer your question, it wasn't overwhelming. it was deeply spiritual. It was like coming home, but in a way that your heart feels like coming home. Your being, your soul feels like coming home. And
Yeah.
so, that's how it felt. And it was very sustaining. Like, I didn't really need anything. My first couple of years of sobriety, I didn't need money. I didn't need importance. I just needed to like be available to how it felt to be on planet Earth. That was plenty for me for a few years. And then, ambition came in and comparing mind. And, I signed back up for for the life of the separate self.
Yeah.
Right. As you got back into this stuff, or as you started getting into yoga and whatnot, and you looked around the room, we're talking early mid 90s,
In
right? I mean,
95,
yoga is
96.
definitely
Yeah.
95, 96 or mid 90s. Like the yoga wave is building here. But as you looked around the room, at that point, you were former military, you're sober, you're former athlete, whatnot. Were there a lot of other guys like you in the class? And if not, obviously it felt good, which is what kept you going. But did you ever feel like, I don't know if I have a place here, or who are the guys I can look up to? Did other guys, as you told other guys you were doing this thing and connecting to this thing, were they like, what are you talking about, dude?
Well, I mean, there's real differences regionally. Like if you go in a yoga class in like Chicago, New York, Boston, DC, you'll see like 30% men, 35% men.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Charlotte, North Carolina, you go to Louisiana, there's 0 men. Like Charlotte, I shouldn't say that to Charlotte. Charlotte people are like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
But you'll see in the South a lot fewer men, like dramatic drop off and an antipathy towards it. Like this isn't relevant to me. Whereas if you're in the cities, young men are on it. I was brought to Columbus, Georgia, to Fort Benning, to the infantry school, to talk to a bunch of NCOs there about whether or not we're going to bring yoga into the infantry school. This is probably 15 years ago. And there were 5 NCOs, all of them with like, multiple tours and all this, but young people, people in their 20s who'd already had 4 or 5 years of combat. And they were all doing yoga, and so, and same with the special forces guys, the SEAL, was it SEAL Team 6, I guess is Virginia Beach is a place where I've taught a lot of yoga. And the family that runs the studio there is married into the teams, and so they're all doing yoga. Like the people who want to sustain their bodies and their spirits and their minds through a career in special forces are doing yoga. I'm sure that that's true in I've known it's been true in the athletic world for some time. I will say this. Sorry, Tom. I taught Tom Brady yoga for 2 or 3 years when he just started out. Like when I was in Boston, he was in Boston, like 2003, 2004. He was coming to class. I didn't know it was Tom Brady. Like he was coming to class.
You're so zen. You're so zen. You don't know it's Tom Brady. And this is in Boston too.
Right. He came into the studio and no one recognized him. Because we had to walk downstairs, sign up, come upstairs and into this room. And he'd come to the 4 o'clocks on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And there was this guy, and I went by one time and gave him a thumbs up. I was just like, hey, nice job. Because he was in this thing called Arch and Grasna. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. He's not doing this that bad. This guy seems like he's got a little bit of game. I gave him a thumbs up. And he looked at me like, literally, what the like, are you, basically, are you trying to insult me right now? And I was like, no, I'm not. With the thumbs up thing that's usually, it's a good thing, but I won't do it again. Like he gave me a look like, you've got to be kidding me. And I was like, I wasn't, but I won't again. And so and it wasn't about like, he's a celebrity, because I didn't know this. It's like, when you're working with someone, if they let you know they don't want you to do something, you don't do it. Right? It's like you're working with the public. I will respect you. I don't understand you, but if you don't want a thumbs up, you don't have to have them. In my class, no more thumbs up for you. And so I have this interaction with some dude who doesn't like the thumbs up signal. And I'm at the movie theater, and it's back when they had the Jimmy Fund, and they'd walk around. This is a Boston thing. It's called the Jimmy Fund, and they'd walk around. And you put nickels in. You think about how long ago this was. And so what they would do is they'd show like a celebrity endorse the Jimmy Fund, and then they'd walk around with a can and we'd clink coins into the can. And I'm looking, and it's Tom Brady is saying, "Hey, I'm Tom Brady, MVP of the Super Bowl. I want you to put money in the can." And I'm like, "That's that dude." Yeah. To this day, I'm a Tom Brady fan because I saw him when no one was looking. Like, we didn't know it was him, and how he rose through the world. And he didn't ask for a special class or anything. He came in with everybody else. Like, there's something fundamentally decent there. Like, he came in. I think go ahead.
It's a nice way to, I mean, whether you're Tom Brady or Tom, the neighbor next door who's just, whatever, he's an accountant, right? It's nice to go in and check your ego at the door, no matter what state of mind your ego is, and just totally lose track of yourself. By the way, it would have been hilarious if you were like still not knowing it was Tom Brady, but wanting to call out to the rest of the class how nice this gentleman's Arda Chandrasana was, like still not knowing it's Tom Brady. He would have been mortified. But
okay, everyone, let's take a look at this guy. What's your name?
Hey, let's gather around. What's your name?
What's your name? Tom. So Tom has got a pretty nice arch and drop. What he's doing here is he's using a block, which I've asked a lot of you to.
That's right. That would be great. Tom's not afraid. Tom's not afraid to use the prop.
Enough to use a block. What's your name,
Tom? What do you do for a living? Right, exactly.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Come again.
Yes,
nice
thanks,
guy.
Tom.
Nice
That's
guy.
Great,
wow. Nice guy. Always is in back. Anyhow, so on that note, to help, like, you have your own somatic experience with how you feel yoga, and I know you also have a real deep spiritual connection as well, in a lineage of many ministers in your family. So, like, it's not unfamiliar territory for you. When you think about the physical experience as an athlete or as a guy who's just getting their bearings on, down dog, up dog, half moon, side ankle pose, how would you help lay out the breadcrumbs for how a new practitioner, particularly a guy, on what you feel and go through as you develop your more physical practice?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that there's a thing called striving, right? Where you're striving to get somewhere with your, with whatever it is, with your career, with your golf game, and or with your yoga pose. And that's why I think, first and foremost, everyone's learned to strive. Like, when I did my first class at Kripalu, and they had us in bridge pose where you're lying on your back and you just lift your hips up, and they had us hold it for a while. I was literally like, in my mind, I'm like, "You're not going to break me." Right? Literally, "You're not going to break me." Was the phrase, was my mantra, It's like we haven't learned how to do something like yoga. And so we do it like we're lifting weights, or we're doing CrossFit, or we're boxing, or we're in the military. That's like, "You're not going to break me" is like what you do if you're in a military training. It's half a joke. You're half joking, because if they want to break you, they will. You don't get to say that, but it's still like, "You're not going to break me." And that's really wasn't that. My teacher's name was Andrew. Andrew was not trying to break me that morning. But we do yoga the way we do everything else. And so, we get frustrated and it hurts and we hurt ourselves or whatever. Or like, we feel defeated. And so my first guidance is like, try letting go of striving as you're learning yoga, and start doing whatever you're being taught with the aim of like enjoying yourself. Like do yoga in a way that you find enjoyable, like at a pace that's enjoyable, like
Mm-hmm.
not, you're not over efforting. It's almost impossible, I think, if you have an exercise background where the whole point is to exercise to failure. And like I remember coming in '79, the culture was like, it's the last 3 reps. It's like you push to
Right.
failure and you get 3
Right.
Yep.
more. You push to failure and then it's the last 3 that really matter. It's what you're doing. That's why I couldn't
Yeah.
drive after a workout, because I literally was like, and I wasn't like, I didn't have an attitude. I was told it's the last 3. So
Yep.
let's say
Right.
you do 12. You do 12. Now it's the last 3. And now I'm going to go to yoga. Right?
Right.
And
Right.
these are complex poses. There's a lot happening in these poses, multi-joint. You're doing different things with different parts. This is like much more like painting a painting,
Mm.
than CrossFit. And
Yep.
so it's like, easy does it would be my first thing. And then if you are finding a way to kind of back off even a teeny bit, like another way to understand what I'm saying is do yoga 80% of your max. Okay. That's just, if the rest of this doesn't make any sense to you, do it at 80% of your max. Figure out what your max is, go to 80%. And then at the end of it, if you've been staying in your 80%, also try to breathe. Breathing is going to really help your experience. 80% plus breath. Then as you walk into your car, how do you feel? Like what is
Mm.
like there's that phrase from Christ, we will know them by their fruits.
Mm.
Like what are
Mm.
the fruits of this? What you walk away from it, what is the fruits? Like how do you feel? And if you feel good, do it again. And I would say that we had 1 million people doing yoga in America in like 2001. We had 33 million doing yoga in America in 2011. I would say, look, people would come into class. I'm like, when you walk to the car, if you feel better, come back. If you don't have to come back. Like, this isn't for you. And you just build classes hugely because everyone felt good walking, like walk into the car. And so I would say that's the biggest problem for folks is they're trying too hard and
Yep.
they're not breathing. Work at
Mm.
80% of your max. Focus on breathing. And then don't judge a book by its cover. Like you may need to go to a couple different classes before you find the right class, right? You could easily go to a situation where the person teaching it isn't your cup of tea. And so just go somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
sure.
Larry's hit that a number of times on the show. Larry teaches yoga up in the greater Litchfield area of Connecticut.
Mhm.
Larry, what do you see when you're teaching guys? Are most of those guys hitting the 80% rule, or are they kind of trying to go beyond it, or what do you see up there?
No, I mean, some of the guys I'd say that have been with me long enough, I think have learned now to sort of back off. But in the beginning, especially when a new guy enters the group, we had a guy actually this morning in my guys class show up, and he took the summer off to play golf. This is his thing. So he came back now for the winter to practice yoga, and I could tell he was pushing it. And at the end, I could tell he was feeling it. And I think it's sort of innate in us to do that. And so, I always try to remind guys or people in my mixed classes, like Brian Kess said, let the pose conform to you. You don't conform to the pose, and try to make it enjoyable for yourself. Because then you will come back and you will find those connections with it that help you come back. I think it's hard. It's hard for guys.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
you have to learn a
And
couple of things. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to jump back, I can only imagine that makes such good sense what you said about you're not going to break me. I mean, you were trained right in the military, and then you're coming into yoga. If anybody poses any kind of a challenge for you like that, particularly a physical challenge, you're going to want to go all the way. So I can imagine that for you, that I would think that would be really difficult to talk yourself back from that ledge and just be in the experience.
Yeah, it's taken forever, but there's a spiritual component to it. It's about trusting life. And I don't think we come in trusting anything.
Mm.
And
What
we're
does
trying to
trusting life mean?
Yeah. What does that mean to you?
Okay. Okay. Um, so I came into it. So the continuum of excellence here is called wise effort, right? It's learning how to take the action without an ounce of extra effort. And so I learned this, and you don't, and I didn't learn this in yoga because I was still kind of a nuthead striving away, trying to get better poses. But I went to the meditation people and they were like, well, when you're sitting, it's wise effort. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Well, you're sitting and breathing without an ounce of extra effort. And because there's a physiology of what you're doing with the body and the breath is what you're doing with the mind. And so like meditation requires wise effort in the body and the breath to happen. And so it's the first skill of meditation that's being taught long before you're in mindfulness training, you're in wise effort training. And so I learned about and I'd never confronted this. I'm like, oh, really? To take an action without an ounce of extra effort was news to me. And the first thing you learn is it's called finding the middle. It's between effort and ease. So the posture is a balance of effort and ease. And then a deepening of that is you feel where there's like subconscious gripping, like all the assumptions and all the fears and the ancestral traumas and all that stuff is in the body. And you soften out of that into what, right? And what I learned to explain it to is stop holding on to life and let life hold you. And so you're sitting in this pot, and it's a radical thing, but it's cool because you're sitting there. And so it's not like you're on a tightrope over a canyon. You're just like, will life hold me? And you're like, and can I like be held by life? Wow, life is actually holding me. How freaking weird. How much do I have to do? And so there's, for me, there were stages. The first was trusting the body, like, I've been mansplaining yoga to the body for 20 years. And it's like, can I just listen to the body? Can I let the body lead? Can I trust the body? And so there's these stages of trust that were being cultivated in my relationship to the body. And from there, it's like, can I trust the moment that I'm in? What is this moment like? What is it like right now? Can I receive that experience? And so there's been this slow kind of movement out of, being in opposition to life to trusting it, which is the third step of a 12-step program. The way to think about it's also the third noble truth and the third teaching of yoga. The way to think about it is it's like humans are swimming against the river. And it's just like creating a lot of like, shall we call it, stress related illness, it's just like and madness and difficulty and you're born into a life where your parents are swimming against the river. So you're like, oh, damn. And so you're doing it too. And your friends are doing it and everyone's swimming against the river. And then spiritual practice is about, first, you just have, you'll see that like, it's always going to be about like awareness of some sort. And so you become aware and as you start to become aware, like you're developing awareness, but also self-compassion. And you're like, wow, you get to acknowledge that you're suffering. It's okay to acknowledge that this is hard. And it's okay to be aware that this is hard. And that every time you do this, it's hard. Yeah. Maybe you can try not doing it. It's just like I stopped drinking coffee all day when I realized that I didn't want to have something acidic in my body. And I really wanted like water in my body. It took me forever. I was like a huge coffee addict. And at some point I was like able to listen to my body and be like, I don't really want something more acidic right now. My body is as acidic as it needs to be. It doesn't want any more, like coffee's just too acidic. I had a huge emotional attachment to it, but I also I was aware, I had self-compassion. So I like my coffee in the morning, but that's kind of it,
Right.
And so you start to notice the cause and effect that this swimming against the river is just so freaking hard. And then and maybe like, why am I swimming against the river? And there's this point where you stop and the river starts to take you. And this is someone not drinking, right? It's just like, or someone not smoking, all of a sudden their body starts to feel better, right? Think about like the things you just stop doing the thing that's been so toxic. You leave the like abusive relationship,
Yep.
and you just leave, and the river is like, you're feeling better. You're like, wow. And then there's this moment where you find more subtle practices that these Yoda teachers show up in your life. Some guy named
Yep.
Rolf shows up, and he's just like, trust the river, trust the river. And you're like, you're already in it, and then you just relax a teeny bit more,
Yeah.
and the river
Yeah.
is the energy that's keeping your heart beating. It's the energy that's keeping the skin on your bones. It's like we're a part of something that's keeping
Yeah.
us alive, giving us gravity, giving us air.
There,
Why would we
there's
fight?
a there, there's a place in the summertime that we go to, and a place I had the good fortune of growing up for many many summers as a kid. And there's something that we love to do called a tide ride, and you jump off the pier at a certain time where the tide is going out, where the high tide is the strongest, and you jump in off the pier and you just float with this tide, and it's very strong. It is very strong, but if you don't panic and you just kind of stay mindfully within distance from the shore and you angle your body a little bit towards the shore, you just go for the ride. And, it is not something that somebody should do alone without having somebody to guide them or teach them how to do it. But it's a pretty awesome feeling to have this agency in this super strong force of nature moving you along. And if you're fighting it, if you're trying to go back to the pier, there's no way you're going to do it. It's going to be horrendous. At the same time, if you're not paying attention, you will get taken further out to sea. And that also will be another version of horrendous. So like there's just, I love that metaphor that you hear about the river, because I think you're right. When you find nature, big N, as well as little n nature, these little ways that things are moving you in certain directions, like it's like the Chinese are wu wei, just non-force. You just kind of go with it. And pretty soon you're just on the crest of the wave and you know exactly where you're going to land on the beach.
Yeah. So that's to me, once you're there, we're heading into the wraps. I wanted to share something specific. So the extra effort, the fighting against the river is what makes the yoga hard. If you're not pushing against the river, like the phrase is don't push the river. If you're not pushing the river, then it's fine, and then you can be Tom Brady and use a block, and you can adjust your poses, because it's not the Olympics, it's like you're just in a yoga class and you're not trying to keep up with anyone around you. You're just having your experience. There have been different traditions or different moments in the history of yoga. One of them is called Hatha yoga, right? It's a refinement of yoga. And they committed to 3 rituals: the poses, the breath, and the meditation. Asana, pranayama, and meditation. And they're just rituals. It's a ritual where you practice something you're learning about life. In this ritual, you practice. And then it has that kind of purpose. If you think about someone who's Catholic and they go to mass and there's a ritual there, they don't need the ritual to change. They can go to the same ritual for 70 years and it's not the ritual, it's what you're doing in the ritual. This is when yoga becomes sustainable for us, is that you're not looking for the ritual to be special and different. It's like this soothing, calming ritual where you're cultivating attention and intention, and you're working with this quality of attention, quality of intention, and the ritual is just where you do it. Right before this call, I was with a bunch of I'm on faculty at Spirit Rock, which is a Buddhist meditation center, and I'm a director at Kripalu, which is a Hatha yoga center. And so these are 2 different traditions. And what we did with these folks in the Buddhist meditation centers, I taught them a Hatha yoga breath technique. And once they learned the ritual, they practiced something really beautiful, which is called placing and sensing, Vitakka and Vikara. It's a Buddhist practice where you place the attention somewhere and you sense it. You place and sense, place and sense. And what we used with a hatha yoga ritual, where we were feeling the bones of the pelvis, then feeling the diaphragm, then feeling the heart, then feeling the heart, then feeling the diaphragm, then feeling the bones. It's like it's just a ritual. It's a container. The practice itself is a container, and then what you put in that container is whatever is consistent with your values. And so we were doing a Buddhist practice in a hatha yoga ritual. Is this making sense? And when you
Absolutely.
start to see it that way, instead of like a means to an end, like I'm gonna do this to get that, but you start to see it as like this is a ritual where I just practice my core values and beliefs. Then it becomes something that you can do for the rest of your life. You can do every morning because you're not. It's not like a means to an end because like what would that be? Like some things have
Yeah.
staying power. Brushing your teeth was relevant when you were 7. It's relevant now. It'll probably be relevant as long as you have teeth.
And it
So,
weaves in the
yeah.
physical, mental, and spiritual, components of it. The physical, you are learning how to engage your diaphragm consciously and your pelvic floor, and you're just connecting those dots and building your awareness in your own nervous system. 2, the steady, easy breath is going to calm your sympathetic nervous system. And then 3, because it's a practice and there's something devotional to it, and there's something that's a commitment to it, and it's repeated, it becomes a spiritual place to enjoy as well.
Yeah.
Can we switch gears a little bit here toward the end and talk a little bit about meditations from the mat, if that's okay? Because I had heard about this book for a long time, and it wasn't until Johnny's weekend up at Kripalu that Derek and I went down, each grabbed a copy and dove right in. And I'm just curious about why you jumped in and started writing it when you did, and also to say I have found it just a great little reminder every day. It's not like sitting down to read a whole book, right? You take it one day at a time, one little thought after breakfast or whenever in the evening. I've read, that day's piece in the car on the way to work, not on the way to work, but when I've gotten to work before the day starts. So I found it extremely helpful, and I love how you break things down. And I'm just curious, like your process in writing this at the time and why you chose that time to write this.
Yeah. Well,
And thank you for writing it.
the first thing is that the daily reflections format, I go to that rehab and they give you this little black book. I think it was called the One Day at a Time book. I'm not sure. But it was like, 365, and you had your little quote for each day and you'd read it and then we'd talk about it. And it was really galvanizing for me to have kind of a spiritual guidance that was something I could focus on each day. So I really liked it. And when I got to yoga, I was like, wow, there's this whole methodology here and no daily reflections books. It's going to be really like you pick up a yoga book. It's like very hard to read, like
Yeah.
I got nowhere in those books. I could not,
Oh, yeah.
I could not read a yoga book. And they weren't written to be used. Like what I got in rehab was like, reflect on this and practice it today. And there was no like reflect or practice. There was just like this academic explanation. And so they're basically useless books to me. And so I had that intention. It should probably be a daily reflections book for yoga. I, on the one hand, so there's that intention that was a wise one. I mean, that book has been of value to people. In addition to that, at 26 years old, I got sober and I went to meetings every day for 10 years. And I spent a lot of that time being like, I am being exposed to more beauty than one life can contain. And there was a deep wish in my being to be able to share what I'd experienced. And I'd literally feel pain at the fact that there's just no way, there's no place for me to put this beauty. I'm being exposed to so much beauty and I can't, like, I'll never be able to share this with other people. And it saddens me. And at 10 years sober, Katrina Kennison was taking class with me and was like, on a fall morning was like, you should write a book. And I had always wanted to for some reason. I don't know now, having written 3 books, knowing what writing a book is, I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of hard work, it's a lot of responsibility. And it's 365 essays. It's a lot of essays. It's a grind. And so, but at the time I had this kind of fantasy of what being a writer was and writing a book was. And so that interested me. And so I said yes, and she was well connected in the industry. She had been the editor for America's Best Short Stories for like 10 years. So when she brought me around, we physically would go. By the way, back then you actually went into offices and met people. So she took me around New York City to all the publishing houses, and we got a good deal for that book. And that summer, so that was summer of 2001. I just took 10 days. I could take 10 weeks off because we had this book deal, and I started writing. The other component to it, so I wanted to do this daily reflections book, and I wanted to explain yoga like 1 page at a time, how to practice it. I felt that people were adopting the poses without knowing what the practice was, and I wanted to be a vehicle in the United States for people to include the actual theory into the practice. Mm-hmm. And then finally, for some reason, I loved quotes. In the 90s, less so now, but when I was in my like 20s and 30s, I love quotes. And I also, my young brain, I have an old brain now, but my young brain was almost photographic. I almost had a photographic memory. So if I saw a quote, I could quote it. I had a superb memory for the written word. I had systems for like, if I wrote the lyrics to a song a few times, I could remember the whole song, and then it became a poem that I knew. All this stuff is gone now. Like, your brain gets older, you don't remember anything. But I loved quotes, and so quotes meant the world to me. Quotes were a way into wisdom. It was a distillation of wisdom. I think at the time, I think people want to live wisely. They're just like, how? Where's that door? Where is that handle that opens into a wise response to existence? And it felt like quotes were a superb way. They capture like wisdom as an understanding, as an action, as a direction. They're accessible to people, and I watched in meetings, people couldn't read books. Think of like how many deficits people are struggling with. They can't read books. They couldn't read books when they were a kid. They can't read books now. They can't learn. They don't know how to learn. But with a quote, they could. It was like, oh, I get this, and I get this. I get what I want to do here, And I just saw the magic of quotes. I was a quote maven when that book got written, and so I was just like, and I also felt like if you're looking in the right direction, you can find that guidance in all the traditions. Mm-hmm. You can find it in everything. And so that was my point in using those quotes is I wasn't like, yeah, you got to use yoga quotes. You got to use these quotes. It's like all the quotes, like, why do you like why do you like a Stones line? Why do you like the Grateful Dead? Why do you like, what this person said, what FDR said, like, why do you like this? Because it's wisdom. Mm-hmm. Just coming to us in different guises.
Well, as Larry said, like, go ahead, Larry.
No, as I said, I think it's great with the quotes because you do then pepper in the Yoga Sutras and other things, right? But then, like you said, there's the Stones or Herman Hesse. I'm on day 76 or Herman Hesse quote. It's like they're accessible. You're not getting beaten over the head with a lot of yoga theory or yoga history and whatnot that can be dense and whatnot. And this is just accessible, and the quotes are a nice way, especially if it's from a band or someone that you like or something like that sort of help you in. They give you the wisdom, and they also open you up all of a sudden to receive what your message is going to be there. So yeah, it's super cool.
And those who are listening, who have not yet the pleasure of buying the book, we highly recommend to buy the book. It's on the website. There's a link there. You can go check it out on GTY Podcast. and I would say that the way that Rolf's teed this up is, you got 365 offerings. There's a quote, and as Larry says, it could be from a musician, an artist, a writer, from the Bible, from the sutras, and it sets an intention, or at least signals what that those 2 or 3 paragraphs that follow that Rolf has written, what's the intention of it, what's the emotion about it. So, like as Larry said, like it's a fantastic way to dip your toe into and check in with your path if you're not physically on the mat, or if you're between feeding the baby between certain hours and you only have 15 or 20 minutes just to drop in. It's an awesome read. It's an awesome read.
Yeah, for sure. Rolf, what's next for you? What's happening? How do you balance it all too?
Well, Kripalu's got a lot of good things happening. Our 200-hour training, so our fundamental training is just really solid, and I'm going to be a part of it in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. So I get to be a part of that, and then our 300-hour training, which is building upon that foundation. There's kind of the cultivation of like real professional aptitude. So you have an aptitude for serving certain populations, whether you're working in schools, whether you're working with the elderly, whether you're working with trauma. There's like, how do you take the methodology you learn in 200-hour and apply it to different situations, different populations, and so being a part of that is huge. I feel like there's like one other thing I do yoga and surfing every winter, and so I'm in Costa Rica next month doing yoga and surfing and meditation in Nosara. And I do that every year, so that's like December 9th to 15th. So I'm looking forward to that. Anything else? No, that's about it. I travel around a little bit still, so I'll be in places. I'll be in Portland. I'll be in Massachusetts. I'll be in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. So I still go maybe 8 times a year. I travel and teach, but mostly you can find me at Kripalu.
That's great. I think you also, don't you drop into B Yoga and Danbury every once in a while?
Yeah.
We were just there.
I'm overdue.
She just hosted,
thank you for reminding me. I should come. I'll be there if things go my way. I'll be there in the fall of next year. I haven't it's time for me to show up at B Yoga. Yeah.
Yeah. Derek and I were just there and did an interview with Brian Kest, who was doing a weekend workshop there. And Elle, who owns a studio, had mentioned to me that you come from time to time and whatnot.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's a beautiful little studio, but hopefully Derek and I can get up and see you at Kripalu sometime. Great people. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Dare, should we take it home, buddy?
Let's take it home. So, Rolf, this has been awesome. We've been looking forward to getting on the calendar with you. As we said, we love the book. We know we've got 2 other books to check out as well. And we're just psyched to have this time to connect with you and share, your learnings and thoughts with our community and audience. And we look forward to getting you back someday, and at the very least, seeing you there in Danbury up at Kripalu sometime in the next year.
Hey, thanks guys for having me. This has been wonderful.
Thank you very much.